When you look at this clip of Chris Birch, I see something very specific in his technique. And this madness from Billy Bolt, exactly the same. This monster wall hop from Pol Tarres, the same. Toni Bou on a trials bike, the same. And even here, little old non-pro level me. We're all doing the same thing with our feet, and it's probably worth you trying to do the same. Riding a bike off-road can be translated to basic movement pretty simply. For the most part, the movement pattern of riding is called the hip hinge. We also have some balance control left and right, some handlebar control, but most of our vertical movement is, or at least it should be, a hinging movement.
Hinging at the hips means exactly that. The hips are our primary pivot point. We don't want to be braking at the knees first. We don't want to be bending our back. If you need to get lower in the bike or deal with something like a big impact, we can bend our knees then, but the hips always go first. Same applies if I need to go forwards. Same applies if I need to go backwards.
But this video is about feet. The feet are the foundation to this, and just like when you build a house, the better the foundation, the stronger the structure on top. In an ideal world, we'd place our feet on the foot pegs near the balls of our feet, away from the controls. You want those toes tucked in, and you want your heels lower than your toes.
Lower is generally better. The why is crucial to understanding this well. It's about balance, control, and movement patterns. When we ride with our weight in our heels and our heels down, it really helps with the hinging pattern. As soon as our heels lift and our weight comes into our toes, we use completely different muscle groups. If you squat flat-footed and then you squat on your tiptoes, I think you'll then understand this.
Being heels down lets you get into the hips rotated out position easier and lets your hamstrings do more of the work. Your hinge will be better, and that translates into more power, easier balance, and a lower center of gravity on the bike. Down the chain from there is riding in an effortless way for hours and hours, and doing more complex movements becomes easier and more precise. The real kicker here is not just the benefits of doing this well, it's the limitations it brings when you do it poorly.
When our feet come forward on the foot pegs, we lose some of that bend in our ankles. You fancy exercise folk know this as flexion. When that happens, it puts us a little bit higher on the bike and a little bit more upright. It encourages our knees to bend first and then to tuck our hips. Tucking the hips kind of negates all of the good stuff I mentioned before.
Your balance is easier to offset and typically results in then using the bike to fix it. So we end up weaker and more off balance, and then things like corners and ruts become much harder to execute. You might also find yourself feeling like you want to put bar risers on your bike, but you're only 5'8". So what does this all look like? Ideally, our starting and our finishing position with our feet is roughly on the balls or just behind the balls of your feet, with your heels dropped below your toes. The last part of this perfect scenario is having your feet straight, toes tucked in. It's as simple as that. The opportunity to catch your toes on ruts is massive, and that's a fast track to hospital. Don't pass go. It also affects your movement pattern a little. It's quite hard to ride on your balls of your feet with your toes out a long way and then hinge properly.
There are some fun biomechanics at play here with tight hips and knees falling inwards and immobile ankles, but I'm not an exercise man, and there's a good chance you're bored. But there are two more things that we really need to cover.
Firstly, it is impossible to always ride on the balls of your feet. You need to use the controls, and the more frequently you need them, the more you need your feet forward toward your arches. It's a balance where the goal should be to go back to your balls as soon as you can, but it's a starting point and an ideal point if the situation allows it. Likewise, the shapes we need to get into to keep up with this will limit the options we can achieve, and sometimes our body will also get in the way. If you've got jacked ankles with the mobility of an oak plank, or hips tighter than Scrooge's pocket, it's going to limit how well this works for you.
Ultimately, for me, it is one of the foundations of great off-road technique. It isn't, however, critical to being a world-class motorcycle rider. There are plenty of examples of incredible footwork technique that you can go and watch. Jet Lawrence is incredible. Billy Bolt is unbelievable at how good he is at getting his feet in great positions, and so is Chris Birch. There are also examples of quite medium footwork from other pro riders, but the worse your technique is, the harder it becomes to get better on your bike.